AI?
You have headphones on? Let's see if you log in, you need to have headphones because the echo. If not, I can just let the sound run on this. Yeah. I must see what my phone is. Testing.
The most will let you leave soon.
You're in. Teresa, you have a device? Then I can let it sound go on my thing then. The thing is, I spread out so much. It's for me to direct this thing. How do you know you're on this? Oh, you might be on the Zoom. Sorry. Anyone pull to the front? Like a little sharing. You don't mind that?
Feedback on my end is so
No?
lagging. Oh,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. The remote? Right there. If I take off the audio, let me know how it sounds. Yeah? All right, but let me do an introduction first, so that at least if anything, we can get started.
Where you going? Oh.
Good afternoon to everybody. Where's Emmy? I can't see you at all. Let's go a little bit more.
Again?
Kind of community.
Okay.
All right. Good afternoon.
Good
Lasana, are you
afternoon.
hearing me normal or?
Okay. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
You
I
can hear me?
you. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you
I
guys
can hear you.
Yes.
I can hear you as
have
well.
echo?
No, I think it's echoing on your end because you're on.
I'm hearing it. Okay. So let me do a quick introduction, turn off my audio to see if it's gonna help improve.
Turn off my camera then, since nobody have on theirs.
Okay. All right. So good afternoon to everybody. As you know, we have been looking at assaulting, one of Brotherhood of the Spurs. It was written in the late 90s. And we have today with us the author of that very dramatic, very visual short story, right? And we went through it. We did our little analysis and everything, and now we get to speak to the author who actually brought it all together. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the poet, the performer, the publisher, They're all one writer, the Sint Martin. I can go on and on and on and on, but here we have lasana sekou. Give him a round of applause on Zoom or in person. Okay, so I'm gonna try to. Let me know if you can hear me better.
I can hear you. I can hear you good. A little better, yes.
Okay. Can you still hear me echoing?
A little bit, but it's okay.
Okay,
A little echo, of course.
a little, not so much.
Not too
All right.
much.
So let's start off, I guess, with the beginning, Lasana. Where did this idea of assaulting come from?
Firstly, good evening, and I would like to thank you, you as an instructor. Good to go? Yeah.
I'm gonna move a little closer because she doesn't have headphones.
Oh, okay, no problem.
It should be good. You can go ahead, Lasana.
Take your time. I'm good. Ready?
Yes.
Good afternoon once again, and I want to thank you, the students, and certainly your USM instructor, Pfizer, Ms. Ward, for working with Brotherhood of Dispersed in your classroom. It's just an honor always to have that happen, and for inviting me this evening to talk with you, to hear from you. I'm always interested in hearing what folks put into a story, or not as much as what they get out of a story. And because it goes both ways, and that's a freedom of the imagination, and certainly of analytical thinking and so on, that is encouraged, certainly in the classroom by Ms. Ward. So yeah, I'm ready to go. Tell me a little. Oh, you asked about where the idea of the story came from. Well, I think initially to do, this is the second collection of short stories, the first being Love Songs Make You Cry. And the idea of just putting some short stories out was to reach more wider audiences. I like poetry. I started out writing poetry and having poetry books and so on. And I felt and saw and heard, listening to folks, that there were those who maybe wanted to hear that imaginative process, that story of themselves, of each other, of the world around them and so on, the world they were making in genres or in forms other than poetry. And so I thought maybe the short story was a good fit for me. In this particular story, I wanted to tell about a child growing up in a setting that might not have been that familiar to us, but with a story, the enslavement of our people and so on, in the background, and how that plays out, and as opposed to having the story of the enslavement up front, have it in the background and see how that plays out and how it impacts on or how the child's normal life helped her to cope, to endure, to remember, as being the main elements in the story, or main elements in the story. The joy of her upbringing, and a number of folks who read the story, and some of the reviewers spoke to that element, that the that aspect of how, you know, her family life and so on, the happiness and so. And by the way, those elements were plucked out of historical records. And so you can chart that story based on dates, for example, and years. So it wasn't just a made up, or I feel so, or I would like to have it so. But some of the elements, some of the conversations, the language used, the language of endearment and so on, are of actual cultures of our African ancestors, of our African peoples, you know, and it contrasts then sometimes with what maybe we experience over here or have experienced over here since then. So all that was in the play, and the idea was to basically tell a story of a child, and key to it also was to dare to tell the story of a girl child coming of age. As a male writer, you always not always, but you want to be able to have multi-dimensional characters. You want characters that can reflect different ways of living and seeing, and so you have to try to put yourself in such a way to be able to tell that story. So how are you going to be able to tell the story of a child coming of age, you know, firstly as an adult, you know, and then as a male? How are you going to do that? And so that was the idea to tell that story of a child coming of age with, again, the backdrop of this significant shift, not just a societal shift, but an entire continental shift relative to our people, how things were changing from the 1500s onward for African people, certainly peoples of West Africa, where the majority of us over here came from. And that shift, and what was it shifting from? And sometimes the story is going against the grain of what we were told about our people, or what we were told about the places we came from, and what we had, and what we made, and so forth. So all that was in the putting together of this story, and why the story is put together, to tell a story, to tell a good story as well. That was key to it. So I believe that a writer should work at telling a good story, and continually try to develop the craft, as opposed to propagandizing just what he or she believes in, or what the system believes in, or what the government believes in, or what, I tell a good story. And I think you should always try to fine tune your writing or your craft to be able to do that. Yeah.
And so looking at the very beginning of the story, of course, I don't know if it's the first thing that came to mind when you wrote it, or the last thing. Well, where did you get the title from?
The title, I can't remember exactly, but I know for sure what it was linked to. It was linked to that this child is going to be entering St. Martin, and the main crop of the evil slave system here in St. Martin is salt. And the symbolism of salt was already in my writing consistently, not only relative to the Great Salt Pond and the role of that body of water in the history, in the culture, and in the psyche of the St. Martin people, but the whole symbolism. What is salt? What does salting do? It seasons you, it prepares you, but at the same time, it in some cultures, the Yoruba, for example, say, may your life be as sweet as salt. So it's not only the seasoning in terms of the saltiness of it, but there's a sweetness aspect of it, and there's the challenge aspect of it. And in some cultures, salt is something that kills you. That not only the salt of the earth in a positive sense, but that if you salt the earth, it's like a scorched earth effect. You throw salt on the land and you kill it. Nothing will grow there. So you're dealing with the extremes. You're dealing with various ways of looking at this element of salt, and you're looking at what this child is going through. Certainly from the time she's on the river, and then definitely what she's going through in the belly of the slave ship as assaulting. A seasoning. It's a play on words as well, relative to an assault, because she's being assaulted. Her life, her innocence, her humanness, her femininity, her childhood is being assaulted by a system that she is being kidnapped and pressed into. And when she comes into, as the boat rounds the tip there by Point Blanche, she smells the salt coming off of the Great Salt Pond. So the salting, again, the very element of it is generating a sensibility that is entering her being symbolically, even literally in terms of the smell of it, but the experience that she's going to have in this new place called St. Martin. She's been seasoned to it. And it too is going to season her and season her generations after by the very intake of the scent of this salt. And then salt as a metaphor as well is at play there. So the word works at a number of levels, the multi-dimensional level of salt itself and seasoning, but it's also an aspect of an assault, you know, on her.
When you wrote this story, were you afraid or did you shy away from writing from a female's perspective?
From a which perspective? You said from a perspective, which perspective you said?
As a male writer, did you shy away from writing a female's perspective?
Not at all. You wanted to, as I said earlier, you want to tell the story and you want to make the characters, whatever characters you're putting into the story, you want to have them have dimension. You want to have them have, you want them to be multidimensional. You want them to look like somebody you know. And so what I would do, for example, when she's having her period, her menstruation in the slave ship, the levels of pain and the places that she's feeling the pain in the back, you know, her spine and so on, are from stories from ladies I've known or been with intimately and as friends and family that I've heard them describe when they're having their period, how they feel, where the pain is. You know, they may not be telling, they may be speaking it and I'm just in the environment and I hear it, or they might be telling me a story. And I say, oh, you know, so what you find is that that poor child had a number of pain in a number of areas to approximate maybe, or to realize the various kinds of pain of a number of different women. And so she becomes all women. She becomes all women in a sense. She's feeling the pain for all women and she's reflecting the pain for all women in a sense. And what I did too with her, sometimes I just asked. I would ask a woman, you know, in addition to what I remembered, in the forge of writing the story itself, I would just ask, so when you feel that pain, what does it stop? You know, does it continue? Does it stay there? Does it stay in your back? You know, what else do you feel? You know, do you feel helpless? Do you feel, you know, you feel like you're going to die? So all of that comes into play. And so there was no intimidation at all. It was simply a quest to make it as authentic, as genuine, as real, as human, as dimensional as I could make her, you know, to reflect. And so a young girl who didn't have a period yet could be considered thinking about it, one who just had her period, or an adult woman, or a woman who no longer have a period could read it and say, yeah, I remember how that used to feel. My back, I couldn't sit down for days, and you know, and I couldn't walk, and you know, those kind of things. You know, and from the time folks start talking like that, the story is going into them, and they are going into the story.
Do you think that's the role of a writer, to make the story go into the people that read it?
Well, it may be one of the roles of the writer. To me, one of the most essential role of the writer is to tell a good story, and to tell a story that reflects the realities of your people in such a way that it for me then that it enhances life. Even if you're telling the challenges, even if you're telling that which is adverse or negative or bad, or you know, but you tell it in such a way that it reflects life, that it enhances life, that it sets you off to want to work or hope for the better, to understand places we've come from and where we can go and where we're going, where we are. To me, that is key to this writer, to tell a good story, to tell it as best as possible, and unafraid. You know, don't censor yourself as a writer. Don't write to please, you know, award granters or to please your parents. You know, you might be a young writer and say, boy, if I write that and my mother read that, oh God, what you gonna say, you know, or what my friend gonna think if they gonna think I'm like that too, and all of that. That's not your job as a writer, you know. And if you start to feel yourself feeling that, you need to do your best to get rid of that or just don't write. Because but the thing is about writing, I feel, however you start and however you into it, you're compelled to do it. There's a feeling of being compelled to do it. So to say don't write, that's not going to work neither. You're going to keep trying. And so what I would say is keep trying to do it fearlessly. You know, yeah.
So let's break down the story a little bit in terms of elements. Somebody's mic is on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. I want to break down the story in terms of elements, the characters that you chose to put in the story.
Mhm.
Where did the inspiration for Nana Mandisa come from? She seems to be like a rebel woman.
I think that story is that persona or that character. I think you find her throughout, you know, human experiences. Certainly, our experience as Black peoples in the Caribbean, in the U.S. I could say clearly with her, I didn't have to go back to the old continent or to historical documents to find that. She's somebody we know. You know, we got an aunt like that. You know, if you don't think you have an aunt like that, you haven't met her yet. You know, you have an aunt like that, you have a grandmother like that. If you're in the village, there's a village mother like that. If you're in a city, in a neighborhood in the city, there's a church woman like that. There's a woman in the neighborhood like that, you know, who she knows things. She looks out for the neighborhood. She sometimes she disappears and then she comes back. You know, she went maybe down south if she's in the US or in the Caribbean. She went to another island. You didn't even know she had family in that island, you know, and because you always thought she was from your island, that kind of thing. We know this lady. We know Nana Mandisa. And so the notion of rebel, to call her that, it's possible because the embattled nature of our stories out here in the diaspora, in the Caribbean and in the South America and North America and so on. Our best stories are so embattled, and those people who stand out, who have to stand up for us, tend to be warriors of sorts, male or female. And so we would say she's a rebel, but she's our aunt. You know, she's that grandmother. We know this lady. We know her very well. No, she might be one of the women in your classroom right there, right now. She may be, you know, because they don't necessarily start as elders. They are people who've always had that kind of way. You know, she might have been like that in the classroom in the 6th grade. And say, boy, Jean always fighting for everybody. She's always in a fight, but she's always in a fight because she's always fighting for somebody. You know, that kind of thing, you know. And so that Nana Mandisa comes out of that. And of course, the name Nana is relative to aunt, coming out of Akan traditions and even out here, I think, without even knowing the languages that we've lost from the old continent, the name and the term Nana as aunt has survived in the diaspora, you know, throughout, you know, you would find somebody's called Nana and it's aunt, you know, it's Tan, Nana, Auntie, Nenen, you know, it's forms of that name, And so she, and I made her a midwife because I wanted to give her an agency that was, for lack of a better word, official, informed, studied. You can't be taking children out of people without having gone to school for it. And that school may be an apprentice situation, or modern midwives actually study. You know, they have medical courses and health courses that they take, and in the old traditions, like we had tantanes up here in Rombo and so on, and other midwives throughout the Caribbean. They were apprentice women who studied how to wean a child. And so I wanted to give her that kind of agency, to give her kind of an authority. And we even took her further by giving her and the reason for her distance travels from her area where she was in West Africa was because she would be called upon to bring forth special children. So this notion of a virgin birth I'm playing with, the notion of a prophetic child I'm playing with, because these stories are rife in the old world, not just among the Africans, but throughout all people. We know them over here maybe relative only to the Christian Bible, and we think, well, that's it. Well, no, these stories are rife. These are the stories of the ancient world, the special child, the child to come, the child, and it don't have to be a child to save the world. It could just be a child that's going to be special for that village or that city or that town or that empire, And so she traveled the continent, but I specifically wanted to bring in the element of her travels for this reason. She, to say this notion of Africa being the dark continent and we didn't know each other and we only were put in touch with each other after the Europeans came is one of the biggest lies, and an oppressive lie that you could find, because the people in the continent, as large as it is, it's large, right? We're always in touch with each other. They travel back and forth. The historian Ibn Battuta, I think he was from the Middle East, but he had some beautiful stories of his travels in West Africa, where people like in Timbuktu, and because Timbuktu was like a center of learning. They had a major university there. Djenné, which is further down to where this story is taking place, by the way. There was a major university there. And Ibn Battuta tells beautiful stories of his travels back and forth and the people and their ways and so on. But that's telling you that people were always traveling and they knew each other and they knew of each other. And whether it was in war or peace or trade or commerce or festivals, West Africa is rife with festivals, weekend festivals, week-long festivals. And those festivals were not only for the particular people of that nation or that tribe or that kingdom, but it brought in those of other areas, of neighboring areas, to compete, to sell, to trade, and so on. And interesting relative to that travel and people knowing each other all along the way, that's where a lot of the new studies in the Creole languages, so-called Creole language of the Caribbean now, takes a new turn, because it's saying, because for the longest while we were saying, well, we developed these Creoles in the Caribbean to communicate. But what's coming out now, and Dr. Arnold is probably somebody you might want to invite to speak to this issue relative to language and to linguistics and literature, is that the peoples who populated these islands and in South America and in Caribbean as Black peoples, they already came from areas where they had languages that bridged their meeting. So when they meet in the marketplace, they had a language like a Papiamento or like a Creole or like a Haitian or a Jamaican. And so the Creoles that we developed was just a consistency, was a continuum of how we forge languages to communicate all along the way. It's not a novel thing. So it's not a French-based Creole. It's not a Dutch-based Creole. It's not a Spanish-based Creole. And I'm just using Creole guardedly because I'm kind of funny with that word, by the way. But for the languages in this case, right? But it's based on a continuum, a system of how we communicated, how we forge communication, and rapidly in order to engage life, to engage trade, and in this case, to survive on the plantation. Could you imagine you throwing people from 4 or 5 different languages and nations on one field? They have to communicate. It's not just the slave owner of the enslaved people have to communicate with them, but they too have to communicate with each other. So they're going to forge a language. They're going to forge a language called Papiamento. But they have a system already of drawing in words and syntax, because all of the Creoles of the Caribbean, by the way, are based on African syntax. The way the Black Americans speak as well is based on an African syntax, right? So they've had hundreds of years of systems of bringing in words and languages and terms on certain syntax to communicate. So for lack of a better word, that was almost the way in which we ended up communicating with relative ease. And again, I use it guardedly, I'm not a linguist, But for those reasons, because people were always traveling back and forth, they knew each other, they knew about each other. And imagine in that part of the world that she's going to be called to give birth to a special child in a completely different nation and system. That is a major development. She had to pass through 3-4 different regions or countries or kingdoms before she get to where she's going. So she had to negotiate that space. She's not negotiating that space as a stranger. She knows where she's going. She was called. You know, so all of that is at play in this story relative to Nana Mandisa's agency and power. And it's good you call her a rebel woman. That's interesting because, like I said, I plucked her character traits from this side of the world, but I put them into a woman of that time in Africa. For the other characters, I almost did the opposite. I picked elements from the African history and culture and studies and and I put them into a child and into people who are going to become Caribbean people. With her, I did the opposite. And if you notice, she didn't make it over on the boat. She was already here. She was the only one who was on the boat. You realize that, right? So she was already here. You know, they're going to meet her here again. She's going to be the one who receives them, to guide them. Just like how she was guiding them on the river, she's going to receive them in the Great Salt Pond, in this case for St. Martin, you know. Yeah.
So Nana Mandisa, her death was intentional then because she becomes a part of the spirit world, the ancestors.
Very good. I didn't think of saying her death was intentional, but yeah. But here again, too, this is important for your students. The writers here, that's why I said it's what you put in and what comes out, because the writer's doing certain things as technique, tactically, or he's writing a general story. But in the review of the story, in the analysis of the story, in the reading of the story, you're going to discover different things about that story that are going to be part of the truth of that story. But the writer is discovering it too. It's like, wow, I didn't realize that, you know. And yeah, so to say that she was killed intentionally, I had her killed to show the brutality of it, because the agencies of power in the old continent, in the African countries and kingdoms and so on that we came from, the agencies of power and wealth and knowledge were so brutalized. They were so destroyed. So a lot of what we have today with the corruption and the
Guys, we'll put your questions in the chat, huh?
Huh? Oh, there are questions? Yeah. Yeah. You know.
No, go ahead, lasana.
Yeah, so those agencies were you know, willfully killed off and destroyed and suppressed. So in a way, maybe that's what I was doing with her. And to use the word intentional is good, and it's interesting as a reviewer to say that, you know, because it develops the discussion around her more and better. And so, for example, that aspect what I just said there about a lot of those agencies of power were destroyed in the old continent, you know, and that left not only those of us over here without memory and without knowing, without being able to counter the lies we will hear later, but also the what is happening in Africa up to this day in terms of loss and in terms of internecine warfares and in terms of the destruction and corruption, in terms of killing off the progressive leaders and then supporting the dictators who are despicable, you know. So, yes.
1 second, the earth is shaking.
The earth is shaking?
We're in the middle of an earthquake.
Okay. It gone?
It gone now? No, it's still shaking.
It's still shaking. Whoa.
I feel it. I still feeling it.
That's like your poem on the earthquake.
Lasana, we're gonna just get ready because I was shaking for a while.
Okay, it's still shaking or it's just
I don't know if my body is just shaking now or if it stopped because it's because we're like on edge right now, like ready.
Okay, take your time, take your time.
Oh wow. That was a strong one, yeah. I noticed that your work was like very character heavy.
Mhm.
You didn't spend a whole lot of time like describing the setting.
Mhm. You said I didn't?
Spend a lot of time describing setting.
I didn't do that, or I did that? What you said?
You did some, but if I
Right,
were to
but
compare those two things,
yeah,
dominantly character versus the actual setting.
true. I tend to just sketch a background.
Mhm.
The background is a sketch. The and some of the characters too are sketched. They're just sketches. The main characters who gets a lot of the abuse. One reviewer said in the for Love Song, said, "Well, I abuse my characters." Yeah, I abuse the main character. And yeah, abuse may be a good word, but I'm not doing it to abuse the character. I'm doing it to put this character through a grind. I'm doing it to show how the human being can endure and still come out, alive and hopeful. And if not them or that person, then what they've issued or what they've made or what they've influenced, because that's how we've moved on as humanity, as both as humanity and as Black peoples. We haven't stopped. We've never stopped seeking liberation in various forms, engage in systems that despise us, to be honest, that have been at war with us, with our humanity, with our very physical self, with our hair, with the shape of our women's behind, with our lips, with our skin, literally speaking, daily, and to this day, in many instances, it's not during just the unholy enslaved period. To this day, it's like that, and significantly, the George Floyd incident is part of that brutality and that war that this human being have to endure. I don't want to make them superhuman, because I don't really think that. I'm not a hero kind of person. I'm not a person who thinks for heroes. But in stories, in traditional or classic stories, whether they come from Europe or the Middle East or Africa or China for that matter, the classical hero story is like that. He goes through such things to come out to be called a hero. And so, but I'm not a hero type worship person. I'm not good at that. I don't do that. It has its place, I can enjoy a good movie with a hero and so on, but I'm not that. So I don't write that. But the characters, it's almost as if you put in ordinary people through that grill. I think that's maybe what I do. There's an intense, because this child, she's a happy child. She was like, yeah, everybody loved her. Her mother used to show off and brag about her. All the other mothers liked her because it was in a polygamous family. Everybody liked her. She was easygoing. She was happy. And look what this child is going to have to go through. Not just the terror of the capture, where she witnesses the death of Nana Mandisa, whose very flesh from her breast splatter in her face, for example. But now she's going to have her period, which is a normal thing. And in her setting, in that particular area, and that particular people, in that particular household that she came from, this would have been a great thing of pride. This, you don't hide having a period in these settings, in some, I guess there's places, every place have places where it could be traumatic, but in this particular setting, it would have been a thing of pride, and her mother would have been even more of a show off, because her mother was a big show off, and because she was the youngest wife, nobody took her on, but she would have been, yeah, my child is now a woman, that she would have been doing all of that. But now she's completely the other side of the world, even other side of the spectrum, other side of the world. She's almost in a kind of a spirit world, the death, the limbo ordeal that she goes through. Kamal Brathwaite, your student should know, in some of his texts, he uses the limbo as a metaphor of how we passed under the Middle Passage. So coming from Africa to the Caribbean, that type of unnatural, go back, it's like in the slave ship on your back. It's like passing under the limbo at the lowest rungs to come out and stand as a man, as a woman on the other side. So she all of that she goes through. If you remember, there was a case where I think the long-necked girl asked if she's still alive or something, and they said, well, no, she looked like she's dead. She's like in a different world. Yeah, because it's the mummy going under, You know, it's Osiris coming out on the other side. So you use a lot of the African cosmologies, not just from West Africa, but throughout the continent on that slave ship. You know, it's the mummy, it's the going under, you know, it's the resurrection, it's the Christ thing. It's all of that is at play to bring her out to this other side, you know. And while she's going under, she's being seasoned. And when she's coming out, she's being seasoned. And she's destined to go into an assaulting of sorts again to become us. Because she's an ancestor of us. She's like a metaphoric ancestor of the Sint Martin nation. You know, if your students read the other stories, they will see that she is represented along with the long-necked girl because they paired. And that's another thing to that pairing of people. And people do it throughout literature, and even in ghost stories, you know. That pairing, you're gonna see it in all of the stories up until the last story, which is set in the future here between the president and her secretary. And you have to decide, well, which one is which one? Which one is the dancer and which one is the child? You know, based on their personality or how they talk. You don't know. You know, did they switch in between? Like when they had the cockfight, you know, which one is the Obia woman and which one is her friend? You know, which one is the medicine woman who knows the bush medicine and which one is the friend? You know, so in each of these, in the second story, I believe, which one is the daughter and which one is the mother, you know, that kind of thing. And so you play constantly these two people, these two symbols, these two ancestral figures, lineage, better is a better word, reappears throughout the stories and so on. So it's linked then to the question you asked about what the grind that you put them through. And it's almost as if this grind stays with you. So when you're born again, you go through another level or another type of struggle, another type of engagement and endurance because you have a destiny to endure, to become better, or maybe to make others better. You know, that's at play as well. And here's where you can widen the story to fit the various scenarios of culture, of the region, of the Caribbean region, of the diaspora. You know, I've had friends from Africa, including Fabian, by the way, when they read, even though, and it's sketched out of historical books. So it's interesting you mentioned the background and the environment. So I've had friends from Africa, when they read the story of the market or the river and so on, they say, well, how do you know that? Were you there? Did you go? Because it's just like that. You know, so some of it is still like that. And so they're amazed that, you know, because I've never been certainly to West Africa. After that story, I've been to South Africa, but that's a different world, a different landscape of sorts, right? You travel there, so you know. But those elements, those sketches are plucked from historical records, you know, and you can also tell the year that the child leaves and the year that she arrives in St. Martin based on the conversation on the river. So your students should check that out. When they're talking on the river, they're talking politics. They say, well, our king has made things fine. You know, we're not going to have no problems going down the river. So, yeah, but we heard that there's people kidnapping people and people, you know, even some of the nations within the region are siding with them and they're kidnapping people and so on. But she said, no, that's not going to happen with us. We're a powerful country. That's like the US saying, you know, you can't bomb the World Trade Centers. We have satellites that can picture a football on a football field. So, you know, 2 planes can't crash into the World Trade Center without us seeing them. And we scramble our jets so fast, there's no way a second plane can run into the Pentagon. Impossible. That was their conversation on the boat. The Asantine has made peace with the other tribes. We are good. Don't worry about that kind of thing. And besides, I was called from the coast to deliver this new child, and they would not have called me if there was trouble down there. But while life was going on, and remember the river is symbolic for life throughout cultures, in Christian writings, in Middle Eastern writings, throughout the human cultures, water and the river is a symbol of life. It's a metaphor of life going on, right? Even more so than the ocean, the river, you know. So maybe that's why I put them on the river as opposed to getting captured near the coast, right? So life is good, man, and it's wealthy. And the Akan people were wealthy, the Ashanti were wealthy. They're still wealthy, you know, and so the king was one of their king. And I give the year of the treaty that she's talking about. So when you read that, you say, oh, that's the year she arrived in St. Martin. You have the year that she arrives in St. Martin in that book, in that story, without the writer forcing it on you. So, oh, she arrived in St. Martin in 17, blah, blah, blah. No, 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 no. But if you read the story and you pick out the pieces, the historical sketches, and say, ah, that's the year she came to say. What else happened in St. Martin that year? Somebody else may want to study, you see? So that goes on. Yeah.
So you talked about the main characters, the little girl, Nana Mandisa. I noticed that you had one of her bodyguards and he stammers.
Yes.
Was there an intentionality with that? Because when I saw him again in the boat, I'm like, his stammering is like pausing so that the other languages could start to mix and match now.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, yeah. I think that was part of what I had in mind. And I wanted to show that the two or three warriors that the father sent with her, these were trained men, you know, they'd be good at, because it's his baby, you know. So he didn't send no pyong guys down the road to go with her. These were trained warriors. These were of the best, you know. But he has a flaw. He has a pause. Maybe it's not a flaw. Maybe you said the right word. Because as human beings, we have a pause. We pause to think. We're so good at something. And to me then, the better we are at something sometimes, the more doubt we can have. You know, it's the people who have such an ego that they don't have doubt that would concern me. You know, but if you have doubt as a doctor that's going to do an operation on your fibroid operation, before he does it, he's going to say, let me go look at her charts again. You know, okay, let me go see what's the latest in stitching back where I cut. You know, that kind of thing. I should have, this is breast cancer month just passed. A good doctor's going to say, before we cut, let me see if there's some therapy that she can, because it's at such a stage that we may not need to cut off the breast. You see, so that moment of pause is for reflection. But I think it's excellent what you said about the language thing, where it works perfectly is on the slave ship. His pause becomes the making of the Creoles of the Caribbean, of Dominica, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Curaçao. You know, his pause, when he paused, somebody else can interject because they realize he had difficulty, so they come in to help. So I think all of that works beautifully. Yeah, great. Yeah. You know, so it plays at the human level of he's one of the best and young warrior, but he stammers. He's a man of action. You know, but he's forced to speak now. You know, he's forced to speak because the situation is changing. The world is not changing, but by the time they're on the boat, the world has changed. And he can't just be a warrior of the sword. And remember how they were showing off their sword and their scars on the boat? Because that's what soldiers do that. You know, veterans do that, you know. Even the sadness of their stories, they tell you, you know, when they were in this war, that war, and you know, why they got this cut and da, 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 da. But now he has to be a communicator, an ambassador. He has to be exactly why the father picked him. Father didn't pick him to be a warrior, to ward off. He picked him to protect the child. There you go.
So looking at the warrior, this idea that his stammering fits into the linguistics on the boat. I was wondering, there was something that he said on the boat that made me had the idea that every time he went on the surface to dance and to do what they normally do to rinse them off and all of that, he was
Mhm.
gathering intel and he learned the
Yeah.
language, the other language very quickly to the point
Yeah.
where he even could recognize other characters who speak the oppressor's tongue. And he
Yes.
was feeding her the information,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
and I think the question is, I remember it now, because the girl is not versed in other people's language,
Yeah.
her personal history has been sort of erased because the
Yeah.
dancer and the other people are starting to refer to her as Nana Mandisa's child. Her
Right.
identity is shifting.
Yes. To over here. She be,
Ah,
there you go. Back to what you said earlier. I didn't say you said it correctly. So she's Nana Mandi, yeah, she's Nana Mandisa's child. She is the child for over here. In this underworld, in this underpassage, she's being prepped to become us, who we are as Caribbean people. That's exactly what happened. And all of them were part of her, were prepping her. They were prepping her with languages, with curses, everything. Somebody was busting a couple of bad words on the thing because, you know, the piss was coming down on them. You know, what the hell is going on? So she was being prepped in all of these ways to become that, from this kind of innocence, you know, to this being. And they were filling her up with these things. It's very interesting you use the word intel, because if historically, and I guess your students may, for those who want to go on in history and even sociology maybe, read people like Beckles, Professor Beckles, the increase of the runaways, the increase of the Maroons, the increase of Maroon nations in Colombia and Cuba and Santo Domingo and Haiti and Dominica and so on, and the US, you know, with the Seminole Indians and so on, increased after or during the Congo Wars. The Congo Wars were fostered by these European slave traders in different forms, both those, the kidnappers who went in from abroad, because, and it was dismantling that, the kingdoms and the societies in that part of the world. And so the warriors who were captured, many of them, whether they were captured by enemy peoples or what, were sold into slavery. So what you had is you had a stream of men who were coming over and young at a particular period during enslavement who were warriors. So when they weren't just carpenters or scribes, because, you know, we had the whole range of people. They weren't just farmers. These were warriors who went through seasoned salting training. When they drop on the slave harbor and they bound like this, they are warriors. They just have to do this and this. They see a hill, they see landscape. They know where they're going to run. Before they were even bought by an enslaver, they already know where they were going to run. Because as a captive, any war captive, your first order is to escape. So you will see immediately during the Congo Wars, you have an increase in slave rebellions, slave runaways, burning down of the plantation. It was just regular people doing that. It was soldiers. They were warriors, you know, and they were like, yeah, you can't. I'm not staying in this. You know, from the time they landed, they were like, over there, you know, and they just biding their time because they're trained.
that's true.
And remember, in the African societies, generally across the continent, but we can speak with authority for West Africa. Like I said, most of us in this part of the world came from there. The generational groupings were like a school. When they went away for the initiations as generations, it was a study period. The women as well. You know, it wasn't just to hunt a lion or whatever. Some of these, you know, folk tales come out of that, but it was a study period. And so it included endurance, it included tactics, it included, you know, the study of the herbs, it included all of that. And some people would have been better than others. So when you came out of that with your generation, you knew, just like when you come out of school, you know who could be a lawyer. When you finish high school, you can be a lawyer, my son. You know who could be a doctor. When you finish high school, you know, among your age group, right here in St. Martin or the Academy or the Mr. Peters or the Lycée, you know who gets the chance, if the opportunities were healthy, across the board. You know who could be the lawyer, who could be the doctor, who could be the politician, who could be the midwife. You know who's gonna stay home, who's gonna be the housewife. You know who could be lazy. You know, you know. You know the coward in the schoolyard. So when you see him as a politician and he gets out, you say, boy, he's a politician, but he's still a coward. You know, this is not saying nothing bad about nobody. This is what we live. So our high school would have been like a period of initiation. And these young men and women who would have come out, many of those were those who were kidnapped and enslaved in a very evil system. There was nothing good nowhere ever, no island. I know they tried to sell us this story about slavery. It was evil. It was evil, you know, to the max. So yeah, so that is, you know, I'm glad you're seeing that with the warrior, because people would have focused, but you're an instructor, so you know, because people would focus only on the main characters, but the warrior has a role as well. You know, he can guide her in the underworld. He's her guide to the underworld. Nana Mandisa was her guide down the river.
Mm-hmm.
He's her guide to the underworld. The long neck girl is her companion, her life companion. Forever they're traveling together. They were destined to be friends, you know, and they're gonna be friends forever. Their pairing is part of the survival of each. In the last case, one becomes president of an independent St. Martin. The other one is a secretary, because she didn't even go on to college, but the one who becomes president said, that's my friend. And I know she's smart. And maybe she didn't get to go, but I know she get the opportunity. She can be good. She becomes the secretary of the president of the country, because they pair together. So we are playing with what human beings do. That's what we do. That's my friend. I'm gonna give him a chance. I know what you're saying, but I know he has a good heart, and if I help him or I help her, she's gonna do good. So I don't care what you say. You know, I'm gonna get her that job, or I'm gonna go talk for her, or you know, it's that kind of thing is going on as well. So she had the companion who travels with her. You know, it's her ride or die friend, so to speak, to use what kids use today. You know, she has guardians in all of these stages of her life to this new world. You know, I'm glad you started about that part coming out. Yeah, she's becoming us there. Let me put it like that.
You spend a lot of time looking at culture, and you mentioned that already. I just
Looking
want to go
at
back to
culture, yeah.
linguistics.
Yeah.
I noticed that the second half of the story is in the boat on the ground. And because it was dark, you had a lot to play with in terms of smells, and then of course the language.
Yeah.
Was it a challenging part to write? Because you can't see anything in this boat.
That is very well put. But you know, remember what you asked me before, why I was writing the story?
Yeah.
Oh, I remembered something. I really wanted to tell the story of a child having her period under duress.
Okay.
That is what I started out to do. It was that, right? And I had it set. I had it set in my mind. I had it set in Colombia, that she went through a trauma when she was a child, and that whenever it rained or there was a hurricane, it would come back to her, because the river. Some of your students may know or heard or remember that, you know, it still do, I guess, but when there's a lot of rain, when there used to be a lot of rain, especially in the 60s and 70s, that area used to flood real bad. That gut coming down from Colombia going out towards Presby, it's really bad. People used to die there in those days, and it was barely anybody on the island. And imagine it was still someone die, you know. So it was that. So I wanted her to live like nearby, blah blah blah. So I had the water movement thing. But for some reason, as I started to write, this other story came in. That was the story. I wanted this child to be. So I was more prepared to write. It's good you bring that up. I was more prepared to write that part in the slave ship relative to the period than I was to write any other part of the story. Very, very interesting you saw that. Yeah, that's probably why. So working through the dark, going through the underworld, if you will, I was probably, I had the equipment, I had the cuss words, that we use when something happening, you know. I had the pain of the period. I had that from friends and from my lady and family. And
pissing
I
on
could
me?
call. There was some people I would call. I said, listen, you know, so if she's feeling the pain in the back, does it stay there? You know, that kind of thing. I would literally call like that, you know, and I would take my notes. I was more prepared to do that. And so maybe that's why it has a certain, for lack of a better word, clarity in the dark. You know, the people in the dark could see their way through because I was kind of clear on what it is. I had the parts like in my head already. You know, I didn't have
I'm
to
gonna
go
ask
search.
anyone if they have any questions. You want to type it in the chat or make sure you have the information that you need for your assignment. I'm gonna give them a few minutes to type it in chat. There's a lot of echoing. Just a few
Okay,
minutes.
no problem. Mhm. I really appreciate the meeting and the opportunity to discover some items myself, you know, as we talk about it. Some of it come out, you know, in different ways. You see different angles.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And as a writer, I think you need to be open to folks seeing it in different ways that are part of the world you're creating. You know, if it goes completely off board, you can say, well, nah, that didn't mind. But if it's within it, you can reflect and say, I didn't see it like that, but that's a point because you're telling so many stories. And the symbols you're bringing in are also generating stories. You know, the underworld passage, the limbo, the language thing, you know, and I love language and I love words changing and so on. In my poetry, I play with it all the time. I love our Creoles. There's an aspect of that halting that I want to point out. Your students might even enjoy hearing this aspect of it. And that is, so while there's this halting and this stitching of languages, and it's happening so fast, and so even the seams are appearing seamless of sorts, right? So they're fitting in, because remember, some of these people knew each other too in different languages. They were traders, in the market day, they knew of each other. Some were enemies, some were allies, they knew each other, you know, so they pick a word, that's you again, and so they put in these words together. And so I want to throw out this here. You notice all the languages we speak in the Caribbean, whether it's Dutch, French, or Spanish, and Spanish maybe less so, but Spanish also. When we speak as Black peoples or as Caribbean peoples, and we speak in these languages, the European languages, one, especially for those of us sometimes who, but not all of us, I was going to say for those who went through to their school, but all of us, right? There's a point when in a conversation we start going, you know, now listen to somebody speak Papiamento, listen to somebody speak Haitian, listen to somebody speak Jamaican, listen to somebody from Dominica speak Creole. You never hear, no. It's one sweet flow. Huh? And these are stitched languages. And it's just flow. Part of it, if you use Maureen, what's her name? One of your UE people, Warner, I think, Maureen Lewis. She did linguistic studies as well. And she said this to me once relative to the Haitian Revolution. I was saying to her, I said, you know, I was amazed that average Haitian people have good ideas about the revolution. You know, they may not know the exact pieces and blah, blah, blah. I can tell you the whole story, but there's certain key parts of it they know. The average person know. While many of us throughout the Caribbean, I don't care which island we're from, there's certain average aspects of our history we don't know. We just don't know it, you know. And if it's not taught in school, heaven forbid. Contrary to Haitian, no. So I was bringing that up to her, and she says, well, you know, just like that, calm. She said, well, you know, they made it. You get it? They made their history. So of course they know it. Beautiful. It's the same thing with our languages. We made Papiamento, so of course it's fluid. We made Creole, so of course it's fluid, you know. And what I said earlier when I started about our cultures and so on being embattled, being at war and so on, look at the things that we make They are the things that are attacked the most. They are things we are taught to attack the most. Oh, don't speak like that. It's bad. It's bad. Bad language. Creole is bad. It's bad English. Don't talk like that. You can't. That ain't good. You know. What's his name? The great writer from Cayenne. He had a beautiful line. You know, his family comes from the elite, and so he's playing with his. He has a line in one of his Demas. He's playing with his friends. It's a novel. The character's playing with his friends around a statue, a colonial statue, right? And so the mother calls him in. She calls in her son because she's like, you know, wealthier, like mulatto wealthier. And he's playing with the other children, the other black children. And she calls him in. She says, you know, stop talking with them. Speak French. Speak the French of France. Beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful, but just to show you. So that's an example of the battle, of the war that has been waged historically against what we make and what we create. It's bad. You know, our skin when it's dark is bad. Our hair is bad here, which is a lies. These are things that are perpetuated to keep us down as part of the enslavement. You know, independence is bad. You know, when you want to be on your own, it's bad. You can't do it. How can you do it without? What you're gonna do without France and Holland is what you're gonna do without Massa on the plantation. It's the same language. It's the same exact language. It's a continuum of that language. And so, you know, our literature, our cultures, whether it's our music, our art, our writings, and so on, are places, our kaisos for sure, are places where it's bust open. And the more you bust it open, the more that artist sometimes is hated by the system, by those who hold the reins of power, whether it's in the colonial capitals or right there in their own island. They are hated, they are despised. And then there are people say, yeah, you know, don't talk to him, boy. You get a lot of trouble, my son. You talking about that craziness, boy. You know, so, you know. And so the language thing is a perfect example of it. It's treated like how our hair is treated, how our skin is treated, how our body shapes. You know, whatever we create is bad. You know, so in our homes, we have the picture of the archangels, you know, stamping down the black devil. So even even the cosmology turned, you know, so the God must be the image of white, you know, his son must be the image of white, and the devil would be the image of black. And so you don't want to associate with that. And so here comes our culture to liberate us from that, because that's all we've always had to liberate us from it. It's the dancer. It's the culture is the dancer on the ship, on the boat, on the canoe, on the river boat. The culture still have its long neck, you know. She gonna be abused too. She's been abused also on that ship. She, in fact, what did she do? Didn't she give herself once to save the child from being raped? There we go. She's our culture. Our merengue, our kaiso, our reggae, our bachata. She's our culture. No matter how it's abused and the most abused person is singing it, but boy, what a beautiful song. What a dance, boy. Whoa, what a short story. What a jumpy story, boy. I see, my son. And the food, oh my heaven, the food. Oh, that sauce was good, boy. You know, and we will listen, we made sauce from the worst. The slop was thrown at us. The same thing with the Black Americans with the hog maws. Our sauce is their hog maws. It's the same thing. Mm. You know, the slop was thrown up, but because we had the knowledge of the seasonings and the cooking, which tells you again, we came from somewhere. We didn't just come from, you know, yeah, they tell us, oh, I was living in trees or whatever. So we live in tree, probably a good looking tree too, you know. But the point is we had this knowledge to make this, to season this salting. And so our culture is the long-necked girl who goes through all of this thing, but still walk around like it's the best culture. You know, Korean people are ready with their culture, right? It's the best thing in the world, you know, but it's an abused culture. It was abused and it's down. It's only lately, last few years, people like, oh, wow, Calypso's great. It's only within the last, what, 20 years maybe, that reggae enters into the tourism commercials for Jamaica. In the beginning, no son, you crazy? Why? You should nowhere. No son, you crazy? But now it's like, whoa, one love. All of them was abused. The Rasta's hairs was cut off, put in jail, was beaten.
Sunny, go see the chat.
No, I can't. What do I do? Hold up. Oh, I see. Wait. Oh, yeah, I see two things. Yeah. Right. You want me to answer one of those? Both of them? That's a good question. You mentioned use records to write. Right. So that's a good question, Ms. Gums. So the information, for example, of what they were talking about when they were going down the river, about the king and the treaties and so on, well, they come from history books. So history books by noted historians you want to read, you know, Basil Davidson and so on, Yosef Ben Yohanan, Diop, I forgot his first name, D-I-O-P. He's a noted historian from West Africa as well. John Mbiti, who, by the way, is a Christian theologist, but writes some of the best writings you're going to find on African religions and beliefs. John Mbiti. I read him as a teenager. Excellent writing. You know, so he doesn't write it to put down, he writes it to show you this is what you do, this is what we have, this is what it's been. But he's a Christian, but he's still able to do it because he approaches it with the respect from the place that he too came from. You know, it's like St. Augustine. St. Augustine's mother wasn't a Christian. You know, St. Augustine is considered one of the greatest Christian saints. His mother never gave it, no, son, his mother never gave up her religion more. You good, I good. You know, I just try to show you people have, and that's why some of the critics of St. Augustine will tell you that some of the lines of discussion that he used in Christianity came from the religion of his mother, because that was his early belief system. You know, so yeah, so you go to the history books. If you want some specific references to St. Martin, for example, the archives at the library, at the Jubilee Library, or the General Affairs Department have archives as well, where you can get some of the historical records if you ever want to put some of those historical records in your regular studies, or in a novel, or in a short story, or in a fiction, or in a poem, or in a play. You can go there. So the history books are some of the main areas, Ms. Gums, relative to getting this information, you know, that's out there. So and that information is out there. It's a general information, you know, because sometimes it's not brought to us through the school system. We would say, well, it's hidden, or it's there. You have to go look for it. You know, and we have access to platforms to look for it. You can go on Google and say African history of, or the African history of women, or you can do that, and then look at the historians. Before you pick one to say, I'm going to read that book, read what the book is about. Read what others say about the book as well, to give you an idea. But right here in St. Martin, when we were doing the book National Symbols, for example, a number of the quotes that we use, the actual quotes from the laws that were made during slavery, are filed at the library. The library have it in their section, which is a matter of asking. You know, it's not in the borrowing section, it's in the archival section. But you, as the public person, as a student, as a researcher, as a writer, you have access to that. You can go and read it, and you leave it there. You can't take it home. You know, so a lot of those quotes we got from there. So what you're going through with Ms. Ward here is really how to access that type of information. So this is a great question. How to access that type of information from different ways, different places. Now we have platforms, you know, that you can access it from. So it's out there. It's there. You know, and for assaulting, a lot of the key descriptions of the environment, for example, and the discussion of the politics on the boat were just pulled from regular history books, or historians that I thought were great historians. Or some historians too, they come up with that funny story too, to tell you had nothing, you know, which is not humanly possible. It's not humanly possible that a people don't have a culture. That's not human. Anybody telling you that is insulting you. They're making you an enemy of themselves to you. because that's not humanly possible. Everybody have a culture. Every nation, people have a culture. The other question is, do you think this kind of literature be incorporated throughout education? Well, yeah, definitely, yes. In varying forms, it should be, and I know there are certain instructors who try to do it and so on, but it is not permeating the whole system of our island for sure, as yet. But we have more books now to have more access to compared to, say, 30 years ago. Your instructor, Ms. Ward, pointed out that this particular story you're reading as a fictional piece was written in the late 1990s. So a lot of us are young at this. We are new at this, but don't worry. It's okay. It's okay. We're still part of an old story, a very old story, and the records are there. The records are there. Don't feel that you can't find, and you have rights to that record. Don't think, oh, I can't ask them that, who am I? No, especially as a student, you have rights to it as a student. Listen, I do the paper for Ms. Ward, and I can't give her no peon story. Ms. Ward strict, she worse than Rhoda. So I need to get a good source, that kind of thing. To make light of it, But yes, the access we have access to, and we should pursue it. Don't be intimidated by it, and don't be intimidated by no kind of information. You read things from here, from other places that are not nice. Read things that are going to be beautiful. And you have to know how to analyze that information.
All right, so we're gonna check to see if we have at least one more question. I double check to see if everybody got the content that they need.
I see here chat. No, just
This
the
is two
incorporated
questions.
throughout the educational system. Yes. I have oh, okay. You're welcome. You're welcome, Ms. Dunn.
All right. Good question. All right. So one of the students asked if you intentionally try to end the story on a high note because they understood that she got her period, but there was still a lot of questions as to, okay, what's going to happen now?
Right. Well, I don't intentionally end on a high note, but as we noted earlier, the idea of the human being goes through this grueling thing and is able to still come out to go on. So that was that. So you don't know what going. It's interesting you said that. You don't know what's going to happen after that, because the boat bus around the corner there by Point Blanche. So they're coming in by the harbor, right? The slave depot where they sold people were there. You know where the Oranje school, you all know where the Oranje school is there. That alley there by the Apong house, right? That alley, I think it's still called Slaven Steak. The steak here, right? The alley. So that was where they sold. That was where the Europeans sold our people, the enslaved people that were brought in by the boat. So there's where she's going to end up. So you ask the question, well, did I leave it open? You don't know what's going to happen. You do know what's going to happen. We happened. You do know we happened. We are here. The Great Salt Pond happened.
Yeah.
Sint Martin happened.
All right. So Lasana, the time is winding down. So I want to ask one of the students if they can come and just share our gratitude and thanks for your time. Chico, come do your thing.
All right, good evening once again, Mr. Lasana, and we first would like to really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us this evening. Um, though we may have had a little difficulty with hearing some of the information that you've shared because with the Zoom and us using computers, it has been a little challenging. But I think that you've done a great job. We have gathered most of your information and we will put it to good use because it's a great assignment that we do have that's coming up. So once again, on behalf of the entire class, we do thank you for such a wonderful evening. And we hope that we probably see you in person sometime in the near future. Yes?
Yes, I
All
look
right,
forward
thank
to
you
that
so
too.
much. Yes, everybody say thank you.
Thank you. It was an honor. Really appreciate it.
All right, so thank you so much, Lasana.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. It's
We have the
really good.
recording.
Oh,
So,
good.
I can upload it for them to listen to again, what they didn't get to hear.
Okay.
And,
And I can get a copy of the recording. Would be great.
Yes, you
Yeah.
can. Yes, you
Yeah.
can. All right.
It was an honor. I really
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much again. So have a pleasant
Okay.
evening as well.
All right.
Bye-bye.